Another day, another amazing thread on the shithole sub, and once again, this is from Christos Arofo. It's one of his comparisons, and this time we're doing something that really goes to the heart of Total War as a game, because we're going to look at infantry. He has made a side-by-side comparison, and these are really hitting home. These are really good. You could do these all day, and he is doing it with Warhammer 2, the Call of Warhammer mod, which is great. Putting the Call of Warhammer mod side by side with Warhammer 2, oh, it's just perfect. You can keep making these side by sides all day long, and you know for a fact that when Warhammer 3 comes out, there's going to just be more endless opportunities to make these comparisons, especially when it comes to things like sieges. There's going to just be more and more opportunities. We're going to be able to keep making these comparisons for years to come. And there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it to shove it under the rug or deny it or hide away from it. And of course, it's here on the heart of the Total War fandom, where it's at its most vapid, where it's the most rabid, the most virulent, the most debased, dishonourable, dishonest. And it's getting 1,200 upvotes in here. So let's take a look at it. I'm sure it's good. Let's see what we've got in our hands here. So of course, we have halberdiers, and you click the, what's this called again? Spear wall? I think this is the spear wall. I don't think it's the phalanx, I think it's just a spear wall. So you toggle that, it's an ability, and you can hotkey it as well. So you don't even need to click the button, you can hotkey it. And you have guard mode, loose. And let's see how this goes. And then in Warhammer 2, you don't have anything. I see guard mode, I don't see any loose, I don't see any formation. I just see an extremely simplified drag men around in a box. It's even worse than Three Kingdoms. At least Three Kingdoms had formations, as terrible as they were implemented. Guard mode, that's it. Standing down! And this is remarkable. This was just a mod made by fans in Medieval 2, the Call of Warhammer mod, and even they managed to differentiate models by having different appearances for different armour levels. We have bronze level armour, and then regular, bronze level armour, regular, and apparently it's different. Both have models with extra armour. And that was really strange. Let's look at this. This guy starts doing a weird spinny manoeuvre. So it's not even a static formation where they hold their ground and anticipate the charge. They start doing weird animations before they even get impacted. And you can see them doing it. You can see them doing it all the way along the front line. That really ruins it for me. One of the most satisfying things about Rome Total War, my early solid memories of Total War that will never go away, is how hoplites, not even armoured hoplites or Spartans, just hoplites, when you cross into Albania and come up against them, they would just stand there and your cavalry would charge into them and they would just die on impact. They would fly over. It's almost like the momentum of the horse has been turned against you, it's been weaponised against you. And that's what halberdiers, pikes, all of these static standoff melee weapons do. They turn the momentum of the charger back on themselves, which is simulated in modern Total War, sometimes with reflect and charge. But you don't see it here. I see 10 losses, 5 losses, 5 losses, so the amount of casualties is decent, but I don't know how much damage they did. It doesn't look like it was much, and I don't get the feeling that they stood their ground and made an impenetrable wall of halberds and made that cavalry unit pay for its charge, which it should do. And then here, yep, the charge was stopped in its tracks. They did take losses because it went from 128 to 121, so they lost about 8, so the amount of casualties is similar. Similar casualties taken, so the way the fight went was similar on each occasion. They both lost about 5% or 10% on the charge. But there's something about the way it works that's just better. It's good to know that you can rely on a static, solid wall of spears. You click that button and the unit is differentiated and it becomes something else, and it can stand its ground against headlong cavalry charges. In fact, this is the way to take headlong cavalry charges with these pike walls, these phalanx walls, these polearms. This is what you want. This is what polearms are for. And then in this case, before they even get impacted, you can already see that they're breaking rank. This guy is actually taking it upon himself to do an elaborate spinny manoeuvre with his halberd, which completely undermines the entire point of it. Look at that, he tries to use it like it's an axe or something. What the fuck is he doing? It's not a sword, it's like he thinks he has a... I don't even know what you would call it. It's like he thinks he has a sword or a hatchet or something. He's trying to swipe at the horse's neck before it can hit with a sword. Which would be stupid enough on its own, but he doesn't even have a sword, he has a goddamn halberd. All he has to do is stand and hold his ground. Also, you can hear the sound of the horses hitting the formation as well. There's impact in that sense. Impact is conveyed in multiple ways. Alright, let's take a look at this thread now. We have 300 comments to respond to. We have 1,200 upvotes and we have 90% upvoted. So we used to have 97%, 95% upvoted on the previous comparisons, the previous side-by-sides. Now it's down to 91%. So it seems like people are taking issue with this, and 300 comments a week ago. Let's see what has people confused about this. Just imagine how more amazing this game would be with infantry getting this kind of polish back. Same with gunpowder units. Yeah, exactly. You have crap infantry and you have crap gunpowder, so pike and shot in this game is worthless. Is fucking worthless. Absolutely undignified. Fuck, those custom god-specific Chaos Warriors in Medieval Total War 2 are sexy. Yeah, that's the mod, the Call of Warhammer mod. That's what this is. He says it at the start. Call of Warhammer Medieval Total War 2 2006. So this is a mod. So the spear wall formation hasn't been added by the modders, but the models and the textures have. The appearance of the units and the banner has. Slight tangent, but is this a base game animation or added by the Call of Warhammer mod? I understand why the Warhammer games don't have all these unique animations, command groups and the like, but I do miss them. Yeah, this is just the game. This is the mechanics of Medieval Total War 2. It's shipped like this. You could do spear walls, phalanxes, pike walls. Come on, you could play as Scotland in Medieval 2, so of course you could make pike walls. Come on, man. And I don't understand how he can understand why the Warhammer games don't have all these unique animations it says here. Because it's not even about the animations. You saw this guy taking the initiative and lunging out like an idiot with this animation, which was completely out of place. It's more just functionality and gameplay. Command groups. What does he mean here? Command groups. You can do control groups. It seems like he's impressed by Medieval 2's complexity and nuance, but he's trying to excuse it, and it doesn't make sense why he would do that. Then someone else says, finally a criticism of CA that makes sense. Well, it doesn't seem like anyone's making a criticism of CA here, at least not directly. All we're doing is putting a side-by-side of halberdiers in Call of Warhammer against Warhammer 2, and it doesn't seem like the Warhammer 2 version comes out very favourably, because against a 15-year-old game that has a mod adding on top of it, Warhammer 2 in a lot of ways looks vastly inferior, dumbed down, casualised, and really cartoony and arcadey. Look at these guys, they look like they're wearing pyjamas or something. Is that a feather in his cap? And they're white? I don't know. The aesthetic, first of all, I just don't like. Maybe that's just part of the universe's problem, but it looks way better over here. It just looks way better. These guys look like they're wearing... They forgot to put on their armour. They put on their undergarments, their padding, and just forgot to put on the actual armour. And of course I recognise that medieval infantry could sometimes look silly with all their padding and everything, but this just looks weird. They kind of look like birds with their feathered helmets and then their shiny caps and then just white. I don't know, it just doesn't look very good. But when you compare it to this, these guys look like they're here to do business. They look like Swiss pikemen or something. And then here it looks like Spanish tercios with the yellow. I don't even know why, it just looks better to me in Medieval 2. It just looks better. And then you have the, what do you call it on the side? Armbands, striped armbands. You sometimes see it in like Spanish pikemen in Medieval 2. You see here, the musketeers have it as well. It's like a buff coat or something. Red and yellow striped buff coats. Let's see if I can get a close-up. This is not important, I'm just making observations here. And they're coming for my pikes. Look how good this is. Look how good this is. Alright, we're running. We've got flankers going from a... Alright, here we go. Watch it quick. There they are. That shit. See them with their red and yellow buff coats? Way better than shitty ass fucking Warhammer fucking crap. I love it. Look at that. Yep. Holy shit. Fucking epic. Yep. So that also shows how good the guns were in Medieval 2, but the whole game was aesthetically really good, and maybe that might just be part of why these models just look way better than these ones. I don't know, it just doesn't look good here. It just kind of looks like... It just looks really wimpy. I don't know how else to say it. The halberdiers in Warhammer 2 look wimpy. So yeah, he says a criticism of C that makes sense. I agree that formations would be dope. It could also differentiate playstyles more. Imperial and High Elf Spearmen could have different formations, for example. Sounds sensible. But it seems to me like almost all of the criticism that Warhammer 2 gets, it deserves more than it gets. All of these side-by-side comparisons show very clearly that Warhammer 2 falls short in a lot of important ways to Medieval 2, which precedes it by over a decade. Now precedes Warhammer 3 by 15 years. Thank you for reminding me again why Total War has been a constant disappointment since Medieval 2 Total War. It has its flaws, but for the time, the level of detail and polish was simply outstanding in 2006. Since then, nothing has really ever come close in the last 15 years that has really surpassed it. Yep, and that's the problem. You can put a modern game against a 15-year-old one, and the 15-year-old one just consistently looks better and does better, and you actually have a side-by-side with the mod that does exactly what Warhammer 2 is trying to do, which makes it even more damning. That looks really good. It's a really packed, dense formation. The horses do not get anywhere, which is sensible. They get stopped in their tracks. They don't have enough momentum to break through this dense wall. It's great. It makes it feel like your block of infantry have mass and are persistent and resilient, and you put them into that formation to make sure that they are, and man, it looks like they are. Look at that, a cavalry charge being stopped. It means something. It's great. You do realise they brace, right? It's just not a toggle. Instead of being disappointed, you should try playing the games. Also, let me add, this is a mod where they had to remove the secondary weapon because it gets fuckety in CC. And yeah, of course, even though Medieval 2 is a 15-year-old game that's really buggy and fucked up, it still can produce better gameplay experiences than modern AAA efforts with slight modding and tweaking and fixing. It's pretty embarrassing. It just makes it even worse. It's not a... I don't understand why, when you're comparing a modern game that should be light years ahead, and an old game is putting it to shame, you then shit on the older game and put it at an even lower pedestal. People don't seem to realise that by adding on the list of shortcomings that the game has, you're just making the gap seem even more insurmountable and embarrassing. People need to really think about what they're doing. It's an impulsive, butthurt reaction to something they should just take on their stride and accept it and then ask for better, but they don't do that. They get defensive and they make bullshit excuses, and it just fucks them over. Not only do they confirm that all the critics are right, that they are knee-jerking and insecure, but they also make the criticisms land even better because they're tearing down the game that is always going to just put their one to shame. So it's just silly. It's counterproductive and self-destructive. And what's he actually saying here? He's saying that in modern Total War games they brace, but that's ignoring the fact that they also braced in older Total War games. You had bracing in Medieval 2 as well, so in addition to having formations that you could turn on and off for unique properties, you also had the bracing that modern Total War games have. But as you saw, the bracing didn't matter a shit because guys broke rank and started doing their own thing in a completely stupid way. Let's find it and look at it again. See that? They break rank and they just get sent flying and all sorts of stuff. It's just silly. Instead of being disappointed, you should try playing the games. I've played the games. I much prefer how infantry worked in Medieval 2, because at least in Medieval 2, you could actually resist cavalry. You can in Three Kingdoms. It's almost impossible to get a brace going. I'm going to get a video of that. Alright, here we go. Spear unit. I've told it to turn to face. Fuck, turn to face. Brace. Oh my god, were you not braced? They fucking didn't brace, man. So I just lost like 90 or 100 guys because I didn't tell them to brace fast enough. If it doesn't toggle on to have them be braced, they're not even spears, they're just paper that get ran through. So I preferred how it worked in Medieval 2. At least in Medieval 2 you couldn't get fucked out of having any defense against cavalry by being tapped by another unit. Much preferred how it worked in Medieval 2. You could keep your formation intact even while moving a lot of the time. That's what pikes were. With pikes in Rome Total War, you could keep a moving wall of spears facing the enemy and just bear down on cavalry. Show me anything like that in Warhammer. Show me. I dare you. Yeah, it looks really hilarious how the cavalry just stop instantly. Even if we assume that horse and rider die instantly, they are touched by a die the instant they are touched by a halberd. He should have said hellebarde. Holy shit. Just the momentum and massive dead horses and riders would disrupt the halberdiers more than it's projected in the game. Very weird phrasing here, but I understand what he means, of course. He's saying that energy doesn't disappear. If you have kinetic energy, you've got it no matter what. It has to be dissipated somehow, it's true. If horses are moving at 30 miles an hour with a rider in full armour, and they both die on impact, they still have that energy and it has to go somewhere. Warhammer 2 looks more realistic. The cavalry is crushing into the lines of enemies, but the halberdiers don't break the line. The unit further in the back is getting pushed back a little bit compared to the first one right in front of the screen. They keep holding the line. That's what these types of unit are supposed to do, and they do it great and it looks great and realistic. Just a little bit like an NFL defence, bend but don't break. Not stopping the enemy cavalry from full speed to full stop and under a mirror. So what he's describing here does actually make some sense. Let's look at it again and see what we think. Alright, so the formation is completely broken. You have guys getting tossed back like 10 meters. You have none of the horses dead apparently. I don't see any dead horses. And that's the hit point system in action there. None of them are dead. I don't think I see a single dead one. And then when you look at this, some of these will be dead unless they have similar hit point bullshit going on. I see a dead one there. So the way Medieval 2 works with cavalry is that some of the horses die, some of the men die, and the formation is mostly intact, which is important for gameplay. If the formation can be broken by a charge, then there's nothing that can stop a charge. A wall of halberds or pikes, polearms, has to be able to stop cavalry charging. Even if he has a good point there with how the back ranks mostly hold their line and are pushed back, it's still just... you lose a lot of men with a lot of health to not achieve anything really. That's the worst case scenario for a unit of cavalry, to charge headlong into spears. So if that can't stop them, nothing can, and the game is kinda just broken. And what makes that ironic is that people shit on cavalry in Warhammer, so not only are they not satisfying to use on the charge, but it's not even satisfying to stop cavalry charges. So there's just no satisfaction to be had with cavalry in Warhammer 2, it seems. At least in Three Kingdoms, as broken as it was, you could just fucking run over everything with cavalry and have one good campaign where you're learning how to crush everything with cavalry until it gets boring after like 50 or 60 turns. At least you could do that. With Warhammer 2, cavalry is just shit, and it's crap and unsatisfying to use. So this guy does have some points with how the way the charge impact is simulated has some aspects that are better, but on the whole, I don't think it's more realistic. And also it's just bad for gameplay. The way cavalry works in Warhammer 2 is just bad for gameplay. And someone has been downvoted here, and he says, yeah, now shows the animation for trolls, giants, great eagles, or hell pits. So he's getting triggered. He's triggered by the post, and he's upset about it, and see if it's janky or not. So he just lists off a bunch of fucking monsters and says, see if it's janky or not. And of course, it is pretty janky. It's obviously going to be pretty janky. I don't know what the point of this comment was. It seems just like he's blurting out with butthurt. Someone else says, ah yeah, officer, musician and flag bearer within a unit. Technology lost now. And yeah, this is so true. You had standard bearers, you had guys that played drums, you had, of course, back in Shogun 1, you had the leader of the unit with Ute, you know, aim, draw, fire. So all of this stuff is gone, all these details have been lost. Musicians, flag bearers. It's now just streamlined into, is it just a homogeneous unit without any officers? Because on this one, like, you have a flag bearer here, right? So let's have a look. Yep, you hear him. Group. Units, defend position. And you can see the banners as well. 1, 2, 3, 4 banners, and then you have the standard for the unit. And then on this, you have a standard on the unit. Is it held by a man? I don't know. But there's no officers, it seems like. We just have 120, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ranks of 20 long. So it's 6 deep, 20 wide. And there's no officers, no musicians, no drummers. Those are weird weapons that they carry, the riders. Look weird. And they have Alexander the Great plume, except it's yellow, I think. Yeah, they look weird. Yellow plumes with weird falxes, it kinda looks like. It's a strange kind of staff, a blade staff. Yeah, weird. Let's keep looking. In fact, I'm going to switch now to top comments. So we've looked at a few of the most recent comments from about a week ago, because that's 8 days ago this went up. So let's look at the top comments. Formation and stances like this representation is duly missed. Some dude taking a knee and stonewalling a charging horse, however, is not missed. What? I don't think people seem to realise, but you would actually plant, what's it called? The pommel or the base of the spear into the ground. They did do that. Why is this surprising? I'm gonna see. Let's see if I can Google this. Alright, Total War Center coming through. September the 5th, 2014, someone responded. Someone said, yes, the front rank normally braced the end of the pike on the ground using their foot. A similar stance was used by infantrymen in the front rank of a square when bracing to receive cavalry with a musket and bayonet, except that in that instance they were kneeling on the end of their musket to brace it. However, that is using the pike defensively. The real controversy seems to focus on offensive use of pikes in ancient warfare. I think it would be quite hard for a man to hold a pike strong enough to stop a horse if it wanted to get into the pike. Fixing it against the ground seems quite essential to me. You don't need to, and ancient pikemen did not kneel to fix pike into the ground. That was a late medieval thing. Remember that the medieval cavalry charges were much, much more possibly devastating than ancient cavalry charges. Fact is, the ancient cavalry did not usually charge frontally enemy formations unless they were cataphracts, and they surely did not charge pikemen, so there was no problem of bracing. Watching the forest of pikes would have been enough scary to stop the horses before impact. And I've read a lot about this, like people have given accounts of that. We do not know if ancient pikemen did fix their pike against the ground or not. There's simply not enough evidence of how they fought. So that's that. There's probably even more accounts of this that you can find if you just Google for it. And of course, he got 173 downvotes, so he got buried. Holy shit. No wonder he got buried. You have to understand that horses are not made for charging into sharp, pokey sticks. Then he comes back and gets another 100 downvotes. Regardless, the horse did, and the dudes don't even flinch. Horses are big, and they have eyes and legs, and horses can feel a spike getting into the body too. Horses die when they are killed. This is realistic though, especially in block formations. Horses will balk or ram themselves onto spears or halberds and claps, and you underestimate the fight half of the fight or flight response. Well, we're talking about chaos-infused hellsteeds that devour human flesh, so I'm not blah blah blah. Fuck this. And we have another rehashing of the whole conversation of, will horses actually charge a wall of spears? And then someone says, that's not how pikes work. And I recognise this guy. I talked to him. That's not how pikes work. The typical pike is exceptionally long, and there is not merely one row of pikes, but 5. The forward momentum of a warhorse that does not balk should still be arrested by the sheer amount of ash standing between them and the enemy. Historically, pikes were completely immune to frontal charges of cavalry lacking extremely comprehensive barding. The only exceptions of cavalry able to charge straight into pikes is fully barded men-at-arms, such as French gendarmes in the 16th century, where the Catholic cavalry sometimes charged pike formations head-on because their full barding would break or turn aside most of the pikes. I think this guy had it right here. Good job, there's your votes. That's nice to see. Minus 96 downvotes for a comment that's factually correct about the magnitudes of force more a charging horse has on a standing person. The horses didn't even slow down like they should. Edit, and by slow down I mean before the collision. But you don't understand, CA bad, therefore anything that goes against CA is automatically perfect, and everything post CA is automatically wrong. And he's saying that on this fucking place, this shithole subreddit that is notorious. Notorious doesn't even begin to describe it. Absolutely a laughingstock in terms of how bad it bootlicks for Creative Assembly. People just don't seem to realise the disservice they do themselves when they spotlight these aspects. Bracing means just standing still looking lost in fantasy worlds, didn't you know? Lowering polearms to fend off enemies is too realistic. It might hurt the brain. Sorry, but that's impossible. Just think, if they spent time putting in the same lowering pike formations as the High Elves, or kit bash reload animations for gunpowder weapons like modders have done, that would take away from additional recolored Diablo units in a game the same price as Red Dead 2. Oh, fuck. Oh man, the bootlicking. Let the bootlicking start. Let it begin. Here we go. And the moderators are stepping in, of course the moderators are stepping in. Look at this. Red Dead 2 had massive levels of crunch. Is that really the point of comparison you'd like to make? And then we have people on here talking like a point of pride about how animators didn't get paid for work that makes it into their game. Animations that they did in their off time, off hours, making it into their game that is being sold at full RRP. It's amazing that people can talk about crunch to try and shit on other studios like Rockstar when Creative Assembly has this massive history, this massive backlog of being shitty in pretty much every way. Small family company, please understand. And that is this guy again, small family company. And someone responded to that and got triggered and had their comment removed probably. Looks like it. Every big company has that kind of problems, either crunch and exploited workers or unfinished games. I guess there's a reason for that other than just money. Strategy games require more work than RPGs or FPS. And yet it's funny how there's this rampant, disgusting fanboyism. This guy's trying to take Rockstar down a peg to elevate CA, and he isn't even getting paid for it. He's defending a game company from being scrutinised sensibly, and he gets nothing for doing it. It's just that disgusting bootlicker fanboy mindset. What the fuck is it with people and their consumer identities? This brand loyalty, it's just so pervasive and disgusting in this subreddit. What an absolute shithole sub. What the fuck is going through his head when he types this crap? Holy shit. I'll never understand how people can spend their valuable time on this earth defending a company from being scrutinised when it deserves way more than what it actually gets. Even if this was to be allowed to stand and just get a free pass without being pushed back against, I would say we need even more of this. We need way more than this. We just had the shitty Siege rework be confirmed that shows that they've just been sitting on their ass, lazy as fuck, and haven't made the effort. So this is just an absolutely aging like milk piece of shit comment. Holy crap. Yes, those are definitely the only two available options. Overwork your employees or never finish the game. If only there was another way. Yes, with the current market, you have only two real options. Nobody wants to wait 10 years for a game. And then it's just a chain of comments getting removed. Holy shit. So this was a back and forward between two people for 4 comments and it just all get deleted. It bothers me because in the trailer for the Empire, the halberdiers lower their weapons to brace for a charge. So the game, and if that's the case, then the game isn't living up to the advertising. It's being talked up and they can't follow through. They do in-game, but not on command and not all at once. I can't tell if they do so in the clip because ops cuts are all over the place and they decided to move the camera to the back for reasons I can only suspect, but in most cases you will see the models brace. I fucking hate that argument. I once said it would be cool if we got block or power animations for infantry because it would look more realistic, and I got good old, there are literally dragons and laser shooting statues, the game doesn't need realism. Small family company, please understand. Also, if anyone is going to wig out and struggle into his match combat, just stop in advance because I'll post 3k sync animations instead, which are a pretty decent replacement. Yep, see that's it, he's already anticipating the knee-jerking, the hair-triggered defensiveness, and no one went for it. He stopped in its tracks. Let's have a look at what he linked. Oh yeah, the rolling. See the roll? Oh, that's loud. Look at how elaborate Shogun 2 was. Look at all this. All these animations chain together quite well. and there was decapitations as well. You had all this stuff, it was so elaborate, so detailed, and that was a decade ago. And now in 2021 and 2020, you have Warhammer 3, where infantry are probably going to just be swiping the air and the ground. And then in Troy, you have Achilles just fucking lunging at the air and swiping at the air and leaping into the air, missing everything. Just stabbing open air in the wrong direction all the time. Just some points. This is the guy that posted. Units in medieval Total War 2 can have tight and loose formation. Yep. Polearms can have spear wall, which softens charges and is good at holding a battle line, but is inferior at damage dealing and attacking. Yep, so that is spears doing what they're supposed to. The better polearms and spears are defensively, the more room you have with offensive units. It frees up the more offensive units to do more in the battlefield, and that's way more interesting. And that means that spears and swords are way better differentiated. There's more clearly defined roles. But at the same time, spears can just be mobile regular units if you have the formation off. You have two units in one essentially when you have these toggles, and it gives the player more control, more agency, and it fits with the theme of the unit and with the game. It all fits. Being able to play as Scotland in Medieval 2 and use pikes, being able to play as the Greeks in Rome Total War and use pikes, or Macedon and use pikes, it was immersive and satisfying to do this stuff. If you have spears, you should be able to play defensively. You should be able to double down on the defensiveness that they afford. Polearms can have spear wall, which softens charges and is good at holding a battle line, but units in the medieval Total War 2 mod have an officer, flag bearer and musician, which is just cool as fuck. And I think he posted this as soon as he posted the thread. So he posted the thread and then posted this comment on it. So he's just given people some things to think about, some observations that he's made. And now we can look at the responses. So that's the second highest comment, because the highest is up here with 490. So it has about a half or a third of the total karma on the post. 490 is decent. And then we go down to where we are. 390. So he has a lot of upvotes on his comment making observations. And it's good that he got upvotes on this. It's good that people appreciate that he is making good observations. So credit where it's due for the shithole sub when the sensible people come through and you can see their presence. And then someone responds and gets 6 upvotes with, I don't know how spear walls worked in Medieval 2, but in Rome 2, at least a good phalanx in a street was MVP of that battle always. It's a shame we can't do it on Total War Warhammer. Tibaha would be cool to see how halberdiers and pikemen hold a troll charge with a proper spear wall. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how you can have satisfying combat with monsters if you can't actually face the monsters and defeat them using tactics. It just seems to all be bullshit that you do in Warhammer to deal with these big monsters. You're just focusing them with flying wet noodles. It's just streaks of white in the air from ranged units. That's all you're doing, it seems like. You just focus them with ranged and they die eventually, and that's it. It's crap. And of course, what he said about having pike walls in streets, that was true. If you held a choke point with pikes or phalanxes, also in Rome 1, that's what I think about. I don't really acknowledge Rome 2. Rome 2 is just crap. But in Rome 1, you could make concaves with pikes and take on... Everyone knows about how you could make a concave at the end of a bridge with a couple of pike units in Rome 1 and chew up everything crossing the bridge. It was overpowered, of course, but it was still satisfying to do it every now and then. And the AI should have been better equipped to handle it, of course. You'd need streets in Warhammer 2, which for some reason don't exist in minor settlements. That's what I miss from the older games. Even I-walked settlements had tactical assets you could exploit. Even... what? I don't understand this. Even I-walked settlements? What the fuck? I don't get that. Small settlements had tactical assets you could exploit. Maybe that's what he means. Yeah, so we just had the siege rework be revealed for Warhammer 3, and you do have streets now, but it's basically just rehashing Attila or Rome 2. So you're going to have Warhammer 2 with Attila or Rome 2 sieges, it seems like. It's kind of like that. So let's see how that goes. Let's see if you can actually put pikes on streets on Warhammer 3 eventually, finally. Something that you've been able to do in fucking every Total War game for like 5 games in a row, because you had sieges in all of them. You had sieges in Medieval 1, Rome 1, Medieval 2, Empire, Shogun 2. Shogun 2 didn't have buildings in its streets, of course, not really, but you still had sieges and you could funnel, so let's see. In the real world, Phalanx was mostly a holding formation that fended enemies off by pressing the pike against the shield. I don't know, I think Phalanxes used to be very offensive. I think Phalanxes would always make big long lines and then advance and push. Especially in the medieval period, I remember there was a push of pike. You would be pushing your pikes in. Pikes are actually, in a melee, a very offensive weapon. You have the range, so you have the initiative. If there's a wall of pikes against swordsmen, the guys with the pikes are going to be the ones pushing into the swords to use their reach to overcome the swords and get through their shield and their armour and their parrying. You're pushing hard to overwhelm, to just have all of these points get through the defences of the opponent, so you're being offensive with that. And likewise, with a push of pike, the longest pike would usually win, so they would be incentivised to be the aggressor, and they would try and push their way through. That's what I understand of how pike warfare went, and that's what you're incentivised to do in Rome Total War in a lot of ways. You want to just push through enemy units with armoured hoplites, sparring hoplites. It works really well. You advance into the enemy and take the fights that you want to take, and do your best to not have gaps that they can move through. So I don't think this is right. 8 upvotes, and I think it's not true. Occasionally a pike would be used to pop an enemy, but mostly their job was to stay alive and wait for the cavalry to win the day. Well, when you're talking about something like what Alexander did with the hammer and anvil, where he would have cavalry come from the right and smash into the back of engaged infantry to break them, then yep, you have a point here. But when I think about classical antiquity, ancient pikes, I think of Athenians that make massive long lines, 2 men thick, that stretch for miles and just push through the enemy and hope to break them. And that's what would happen. I remember the Athenians did that to the Persians and didn't have to deal with them again for like 50 years or something, so that's what I imagine when I think about pikes. Unless you're talking about medieval push of pike, which is something similar. Pikes advancing, trying to break other pikes by being aggressive and hoping that theirs are longer and that they can outlast them. They could do more, but it turns out actively using a giant stick to spear enemies can break the stick. I don't think you'd be worrying about this, what the fuck, like this is the last of your problems. If your pike breaks, then you have an excuse to pull back and let another guy take your place. And it's exhausting when you have to do it all day. So they generally just kind of hung out. I don't buy this. In Rome 1 and Rome 2, it's a goddamn monster of death killing everything it sees. Just kill, kill, kill. Yep. Pokey long sticks, pokey sticks, anything else. Yeah, this is true. And that's why you had a bit of an arms race where the Macedonians with their sarissa, which was like fucking 6 meters long or something, they would come out on top against regular hoplites. The Phalangites would overcome regular hoplites. And that's how Philip II initiated one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen, and his son saw it through, using the same weapons and tactics. Units in the Medieval 2 mod have an officer, flag bearer, musician, which is just cool as fuck. And then someone responds with a paragraph. Honestly, all of the complaints about Total War Warhammer, and there's plenty of valid ones despite it being a good game. Alright, so this guy might be sensible. This is the one I think of most. On the tabletop, flag bearers, musicians and sergeants play a vitally important role, and they're not even that hard to model. Harder to animate, but Warhammer's infantry animations are already underwhelming. Yep, exactly, they're almost non-existent. Hell, there doesn't even need to be a gameplay benefit if you don't want there to be. Personally, I'm mixed. It feels fluffy for the command staff to give morale benefits, but that does also kind of subtly buff spells too, since they're the only things you can aim with any kind of reliability, and spells are already so powerful. Just have them there to look cool. Basically give Cold One Riders their fucking drums, you cowards. 50 upvotes seems to resonate with some people. My favourite part of Total War is my artillery charging walls instead of firing. 30 upvotes. They are harder to model when you have to implement them for nearly every single unit variation of every single race. Well, they can try. I think the one thing that Medieval Total War Warhammer mod does a hell of a lot worse than Warhammer Total War is magic and monsters. How the fuck are you meant to beat 2 hit point monster units in the Medieval Warhammer mod? Have you not tried it? I should really fucking upload battles showing how that mod works. I've seen people streaming that game on my Discord, and it seems way better than the modern AAA effort. The battles seem way more detailed, with way more depth, way more tactically interesting. This seems to just be incredulity. Try the fucking mod, just play it. I don't think he's played it. And someone says with artillery. Beastmen units wear double HP infantry. You siege a rebel settlement that has them in it, and you've got fucking bull guys sallying out to murder you. Late game, I always pack 1 or 2 gunpowder or AP missile units. I've seen a unit of Jezzails wipe out ogres, trolls, and even steam tanks in just a few volleys. It's like the engine in game wasn't meant for that and modders did their best. Oh man. Well, you should see what it's like in fucking Warhammer Total War. That is a game that's built on an engine that was designed for line infantry combat with Empire, and it's been habilitated to sort of simulate infantry combat. That game is crushed so hard when it does melee combat. All you have to do is look at Rome 2. This is fundamentally the same game as Rome 2 today. It has the same HP system, it has the same janky collision, it has the same spacing of infantry. Rome 2 was an absolute abomination in terms of how it simulated what it was designed for. Roman infantry combat, and you have the same game to this day. So I hate to break it to you, but Medieval 2 was designed to simulate cavalry and infantry fights, medieval period armoured infantry slamming against each other, but the engine that your Warhammer game is designed for is line infantry standing off against each other in the American Civil War. Like, come on. Someone asks, how exactly do the officers, flag bearers, and musicians work? Like, if a unit is 120 models, do you get 117 plus those 3, or 120 with 3 extra? Do they fight or just stand around? If they fight, do they have the same stats as the unit they're a part of? So this is a lot of curiosity here. He's asking a lot of questions. And I think this is wrong. 117 plus 3, nope. You've always had the plus 2. Like, this is why you would have 242 men in a unit of comitatenses and barbarian invasion, or you would have 243 in Rome Total War with a legionary cohort that's the highest size. The 3 extra men are the eagle carrier, the standard bearer, and the commander of the unit, the centurion or whatever it is. It wouldn't just be 117 plus 3, it would be 120 plus 3. If it's different, it's because the modder has changed it to avoid the convention that Total War's always had. The best part, honestly, is just watching them. Listening to them play the music or watch as a standard bearer collapses during the battle. It adds to the immersion, to your investment in the game, even with such a minor detail. I will say this, old Total War games will forever be best games in my heart for these small useless details, because they made the game that much more enjoyable even up to this day. Yet, details matter and details last forever. It takes almost no effort to get little details right, but people notice it for decades to come. And we can't even have reloading animations on guns in Warhammer 2 or Warhammer 3, the upcoming Warhammer 3. So this conversation is just so ironic. And this is interesting. This guy answers and he says, I've played a long time with various mods that add them, these standard bearer guys, musicians, leaders of units, and they're good. They don't take anything away, and simply add flavour and immersion and make the game that bit better. That they aren't in the newer games is a shame, especially considering modders, unpaid people doing this in their free time, have managed it. They fight and look cool as fuck. CA should definitely add them, and people love having these little details, as you can see the amount of downloads for Banner Carriers mod. Yeah, that's a good point. If there's a mod that has a lot of people downloading it to add these things in, then that shows that there's a demand, and that they're not catering to this. Then someone else responds, The weird thing about the last point is almost every tabletop unit has an officer, musician and standard bearer, and the engine still supports them. You can add them with some fairly simple changes to the unit table, though you'll need to provide the models yourself, but they sadly didn't make it in-game. So this indicates that even with all of the infrastructure there, all of the code base that's required to have these in the game, they still decided it wasn't worth the effort to have these little details, even though it seems to fly in the face of the tabletop that's supposed to be the inspiration for these games. So that suggests extreme laziness, even with all of these excuses to put in the work and go that extra distance. They're still not willing to do it. It's still not a priority. So that's just another example of the mask slipping, and you can see the true motivations laid bare. Someone remarks, similarly to how I did, lol at the halberdier in Warhammer 1 that tried to do an underhanded slash with a halberd against a charging Chaos Knight, nearly 400 upvotes, and then people start mocking it. It's the new meta, he's trying his best. It feels reasonable to expect that human soldiers will be far more basic in a game where most units are not human at all. So this excuse again, we don't put effort here because look at all this effort over there. There's a big difference between having to animate a human rig and a cavalry rig, and then what Warhammer 1, 2, 3 has, a gorillion different rigs for all manner of creatures, which is not to say I don't want better animations for things like bracing, but this is certainly why it isn't there already. No, it isn't. That's not it at all. You're wrong. It actually took work to take out the reloading animations and all the gun tactics from the guns in Warhammer. We already had all of the work done to have guns in Warhammer, but they decided to completely gut the guns so that they're not even guns anymore. They're just damage projectors at range. It's not true. This is wrong, and it's easy to show that it's wrong. All you have to do is look at how not only did they not expend the effort to make guns in Warhammer, but they took out the effort that they had already done to have guns. Effort that was put in easily by modders. One fucking guy can do the work in his fucking room, in his bedroom, that CA were unwilling to do. This is a bullshit excuse. It's completely wrong to say this. They decided consciously to not have this detail because they don't want a detailed game. They want a streamlined game that has wide appeal, that even the dumbest, lowest common denominator casual can get into and play and understand. They are going for a streamlined, shallow, tactically flat, simplified, arcadey game. So anything that isn't in line with that gets tossed out. It's like that scene in Pearl Harbor where they're trying to make the planes as light as possible so they can take off from the carrier. I think there's a scene like that in Armageddon as well when they're getting ready to nuke the asteroid. They're trying to just get rid of everything that isn't absolutely necessary for a really superficial experience that they can just sell to as many people as possible. This is completely missing it. This is not it at all. We know this is wrong. But to me it makes the game feel wide but not deep. Yep. Besides, didn't they have various types of these formations in Rome Total War 2 and Attila? It's not like they were supposed to start from zero, exactly. But always just ask yourself, how the fuck did we arrive here? What chain of decisions brought us where games from 2004 to 2006 have more common sense and we're trying to create a real physical battle, but games from 2017 to 2020 feel emptier but more flash in numbers and stats? Tell me all the monsters and spells feel better if the existing humans have the depth. To me, all the monsters and spells feel better if the existing humans have depth. Each give each other more weight and importance. Exactly, they lend meaning to each other. And this got 170 upvotes, and this got 85, so this is a completely demonstrably false comment, and this is a correcting comment. This one has twice as many upvotes as that one. And then this guy responds to it, and this guy is an absolute bootlicker that does this all the fucking time. He just waits for these threads to pop up so he can do this bullshit. You want the honest truth? I've played hundreds of hours in Medieval 2, Shogun 1 and 2, and Rome 1 and 2, plus thousands of hours of Warhammer 1 and 2. Thousands of hours of Warhammer 1 and 2. Seeing animations was cool the first time. After that, I completely forgot about them and stopped caring. Alright, well, let's just have them be taken out because you don't appreciate it. I really don't care if my halberd's braced properly or not after I've dealt with the 5000th battle and 10,000th cycle charge. This is the dumbest, thought-terminating cliche bullshit that you could ever say. It applies to absolutely everything. Imagine if people said this about food. After I've ate my 100th pizza, I stopped caring about whether the pizza tasted good. After the first 100,000 miles I drove in my car, I didn't care if it could keep driving another 100,000 miles. I didn't care if it could drive another 100,000 miles in the same way. This is just brain-dead, thought-terminating cliche, bootlicking cringe. You would never see this get a pass on any other subreddit. People would never say, oh, after I fired my first 100,000 shots with a G36 in this Battlefield game, I stopped caring about if the gun sounded and looked satisfying. I just wanted to keep dealing damage effectively. Fuck this. How did people upvote this fucking nonsense? This is pure apologetics. Cringe apologetics. So frankly, if having those animations meant we had a more bare bones roster of units in Warhammer, I'd be wanting them gone. You would be wanting them gone? Holy shit, look at this. He's setting up an absurd scenario and then he's trying to take a stand that doesn't exist. And it's a bullshit spurious point. The work has already been done to have animations and reloading. I'm sure this fucking idiot has been on the thread about the reloading animations for guns being absent as well. It's not just about the animations, it's about the gameplay itself being fucked. The animations are there on top of the good gameplay. And this is once again getting it completely wrong. This is not what's happening at all. The animations have already been done. We've seen them recycle animations from older games into new ones before, if they have to do it. They consciously decided to not have animations because they decided not to have infantry combat mean anything. It's completely streamlined and dumbed down. They would actually do work to remove it if it was already in the game. They've consciously made a decision to not have it. They could easily do it, they've decided not to. Also, sure, they had formations in previous games, but yet again, there's still rigging and animation that goes along with that, which they've already done the work for. So unless you would be fine with incredibly sloppy movement into formations, or them just snapping into place, which clearly you'd have issues with, they shouldn't be added. They shouldn't be added, bullshit. Also, why would I ask myself how we got here? I'm having more fun. Yes, fun, it's a word. I know people who regularly post on Vol subreddit forget that people can like things because it's fun. Explain how it's fun. Show us the most fun thing you've ever done in this game. Upload it. Fucking upload it. You're talking shit. How is it fun if you're sitting here miserably pushing back against people asking for games to be improved? How absurd is it that you can attack other people for not caring about your fun that's alleged, your hypothetical fun, but people that want games to be better so they can have fun are the bad guys? See how the narrative gets completely reversed on this disgusting shithole sub when these bootlickers turn up and inject their narrative? It doesn't have to be a hardcore immersive experience. I don't understand what this says here. It doesn't just have to be a hardcore immersive experience than I've ever had with any other Total War game. This is just weird. That is nonsense. Maybe I'm a brainwashed consumer. Well, you are. You've proved it. Your fucking post history is just full of bootlicking. You're a full-time apologist for lazy, bad game design who just can't appreciate the finer details, but who cares? It's fun. Well, yeah, so why are you here talking about it then? Who cares? See this nihilism? That's what this is. Making excuses. On the one hand, he says, who cares? It's fun. On the other hand, he spends all this time bootlicking and defending laziness. And this was a week ago. We just had the Siege rework come out and we see that it's terrible. This has aged like milk. I will gladly criticise things that actually impair the fun. Legendary modifiers limiting units, but lower settings being too easy. Sieges being completely one-sided. Certain units being straight upgrades to others in the same roster. Certain factions just having more to them than others. Certain factions late games being super limited to single entity doom stacks due to the aforementioned some units or upgrades, etc. Okay, well, no one was complaining about this until I made videos laying out and formulating these things in extreme detail, articulating it extremely precisely. No one was really complaining about any of this stuff. This subreddit was an absolute echo chamber hugbox this time last year. It's only now that I've made a slew of videos finally formalising these things undeniably that it has become accepted that these things are actually problems, and here we are with you, one of the worst bootlicking losers on this shithole subreddit, wrote copying my talking points, vindicating me. And fuck you for shitting on my subreddit, the place where people that are serious about games and thinking about them properly figure out these things and formalise them so that you can actually conceive of and understand them while you're over here talking all this shit. Fucking contemptible, just worthless. Let us do our work and shut the fuck up. What I won't criticise is a company skimping on certain aspects that would be cool to have, but don't affect the game in any other way. Like what? Not because I don't believe it wouldn't be cool, but because I'd much prefer the focus to be on other things. Okay, well how about this? Stop bootlicking and making bullshit excuses and actually take the time to understand the situation and the forces at play. And don't try and undermine the people that are actually asking for better. Because when you do this pathetic shit, you're making it easier for the games to get worse. You're injecting plausible deniability to shit game design. And then this guy says, and it would mean that, make no mistakes, putting more of the animation budget into Empire Infantry would come at a cost to the other factions, and while I'm sure Empire fans would be fine with that, I would not be. Look at this, making excuses, given the zero-sum excuse to not make the game better. Fuck's sake, all of the money goes into marketing. Why are you talking about this? Holy shit, these people are brain dead. They are just completely head in the sand, gormless. They don't understand what the fuck is going on. They say this while most of the budget goes into marketing the game. I don't understand what the fuck is wrong with people that they can so willingly adopt this mindset. Have they all just brainwashed each other here into being bootlickers that make excuses? He's not even getting paid to say this shit. What the fuck? He's just making this up. Also, I can't possibly not emphasise at this point that a lot of this stuff already exists and is simply deactivated. It's there in the game and it's been turned off. Remember, we already had line infantry tactics in the first Total War game 20 years ago. It doesn't take work to implement line infantry. They've already done it on all these different engines. They did it with Shogun 1, they did it again with Medieval 2, and I think modders have managed to do it on their own in Rome 1, which is the same engine as Medieval 2. They did it right away again with Empire, so in 2 games in a row on different engines, Medieval 2 and Empire, they managed to implement line infantry combat and tactics, guns having reloading and aiming and firing animations. They already did all this. They did it consecutively. And then for games like Rome 2 and Attila, they simply deactivated it. They turned it off. This stuff still exists. It wouldn't even take that much to import it into these modern games. I think that might have been what the mod did for the reloading animations for guns. Imported it from an earlier game because the work had fucking already been done. This is extremely pathetic excuse making from bootlickers. Uninformed bullshit excuse making. Absolutely. I am easily able to willingly suspend my disbelief for enjoyment. Enjoyment? I like how enjoyment has just taken on this elusive property of I'm gonna sit here in my box and just be happy with myself, and it's completely divorced from anything that's actually happening in the game. He's managed to make believe hard enough, suspend my disbelief for enjoyment. He's managed to do that with such proficiency that he's completely divorced himself from the actual gameplay and the mechanics of the game. His enjoyment is just a self-masturbatory navel-gazing thing he does with his game that's inadequate, and it doesn't matter if it's inadequate, he just does it. It's so pathetic. The animations may not be realistic, but it's something I'm totally fine with knowing we still have such potential variation. See how it's just vague again? Potential variation. Nothing real. Oh, fuck. Yeah, unfortunate reality that there's only finite manpower, time and resources. It's funny how people just run with this dead-end, debunked years ago narrative that's easily falsifiable. Fuck's sake. Am I happy that infantry don't have better animations? Fuck no. Well, they made a decision that makes you unhappy, and you're going to keep buying the games, presumably, so you're a sucker, you're going to get exactly what you pay for. And look, he actually uses the phrase here, zero-sum game. And people already mentioned Red Dead 2 earlier. It's possible to have detailed games. This zero-sum is not even really true. You can just keep putting money into these games to make them better and better, but they decide not to. The zero-sum is really between marketing to bait in suckers like you and gameplay which appeals to actual critical players that have standards. That's the zero-sum. If the suckers that only pay attention to superficialities outnumber and overpower the influence of the people that actually want good games, that's the zero-sum. That's where they have to decide how to allocate their money. It's not about, do we make animations for infantry or monsters? It's, do we put money into the actual game? Or do we just look at how gullible and of low standards our consumer base is and think, yeah, that's good enough, and then just put everything else into marketing? That's the zero fucking sum. Get it right. Agreed, and same. Frankly, with all the micro magic required to do well in Warhammer 2, I'm almost always fully zoomed out. It's very, very rare for me to zoom down and watch individual units, which is ironic, because this game is not tactical. This is not a good real-time tactics game. And if it was, you would be able to zoom in, and at every scale of resolution, the game would have impressive fidelity, and you'd be able to see how good the game is. You can do that in Men of War 2. You can zoom in and look at the barrel on every tank, turn it with minute precision to dial in on the target and fire. You can watch the loader loading the shell into the gun. You can watch sandbags absorb bullets and eventually fall apart, and then the man behind is exposed. Every man has detail. Entire battles that are ongoing with hundreds of men fighting with armor support. It's all detailed and real and simulated. These games are not well simulated. And it's not just at the most precise bottom levels, it's also at the top level where you're micromanaging. It reminds me of Supreme Commander, where even though you could have thousands of units fighting, you could zoom down and follow the path of each individual unit all the way across the battlefield and see its story. You can't do that anymore because there's nothing to observe. There's no events, there's nothing meaningful happening. The fact the game is so fast paced you don't have time to zoom in anymore is a big issue with Warhammer in my opinion. Proper combat mod 2 is pretty good at slowing down the pace of combat if you don't mind modding. Also, you could follow individual katana samurai during the fight and see them winning their duels and then eventually be overcome. You could do that and it was good to look at. And what do you know, Shogun 2 is a really tactical game with good melee. Guys are not just lunging the air and having pieces of their health bar just disappear for no conceivable reason. And then someone says, real generals weren't sitting on the front lines staring at their soldiers fighting, they were directing the flow of battle or fighting themselves. Use the replay function if you want to watch your battles unfold. And as someone responds with, they weren't in the air clicking either, so... Oh man. And then someone says, they downvote because they hate the truth. It clearly isn't enough of a sticking point for CA to care, much less the vast majority of users, and that's it. They don't care because all they want is money. And what do the people buying the game want? Well, they have low standards, so all they care about is the most superficial aspects. They've cultivated a very casual consumer base that has very low standards. That's all they want. That's why I've said it's a moving art gallery Total War and it isn't a real Total War game. These are not real Total War games. And all you have to do is look at the Siege rework that we just saw, and that's confirmed. It's confirmed as clearly as it'll ever be. Alright, look at this. Let's get ready for this charge. So they're about to get charged, they're facing the other direction, and then right before the charge comes in, oh, some of them actually get hit in the back, and then you can see them all turning around. It's like they have their own awareness, like they're actual men. Look at that. Look at them reacting to being charged in the back. See them turning around? It's like, holy shit, what's behind me? I just get attacked in the back. See that? Some of them are dying. rear charged off Cretan archers, and some of them are dying to this. And this guy over here is totally surrounded and he goes down. See how the simulation is important? Let's follow this guy. He's the one that gets surrounded and goes down. Look, look at his head turning. You can see their heads turning to face. And they get caught off guard and they get stabbed in the back and go down. See how the simulation is important? See how the animations are important? And then we have the Tosturo itself. Let's find it. Here we go. Now. Look at that detail, it just puts modern Total War games to shame. And the real sad thing about levels of detail like this is that they're not at all consistent with a dumbed down, streamlined, simplified game where players have to readily and immediately be able to understand absolutely every aspect of the gameplay. This is a complex formation that has unique ways it works, that has to be understood and figured out, so it can't be on modern Total War games, no way. What a sad reality we live in, minus 16 for saying this. He's affirming what the guy said to get 31 upvotes, and he gets minus 16, so he's right and he's getting downvoted for it. And this guy's responding to someone saying, but don't affect the game in any other way. And let's see what he was responding to. Was it the pathetic post? It's the pathetic post that he's responding to, the bootlicker post. And he says, this is where I disagree. Being able to brace against a charge isn't just a cool thing to have, it's tactics, and a game where managing your units in a tactical manner is the core gameplay. Exactly, these are real-time tactics games where the tactics are admittedly shit. Who is advocating for tactics here? Who is advocating for a good real-time tactics game? And who is advocating for irrelevant shit that has nothing to do with what these games actually involve, the actual playing of the games? Who on this thread is actually trying to have better games with good gameplay? It ain't the fucking bootlickers making excuses. And then he says, also, people have different criterias of fun, different priorities. You seem to already know that. Someone says, infantry brace is automatically in Warhammer 2, which I think makes a lot more sense. The game already has enough ability microing from lords and heroes, and having to remember to hit the spear wall button at the start of every single battle doesn't add much to tactical depth to the game. Well, that's wrong, because all you have to do is look at how you use Yareshigaru in Shogun 2, or how you use pikes in Rome Total War, or how you would consider things like how you would fire by rank or new fire in Shogun 1 21 years ago. It would affect how you would fight. You would be able to use it to get advantages. This is advocating for less gameplay, less player agency, less ability of the player to control the fight. Fuck's sake. It's so easy for me to think of times in modern Total War games where my units are just not doing the job that I want them to do, where I wish I had a button that could force. But just without any animation. Game being visual medium, I would really like to see they actually brace, rather than being a simple stat change without any visual cue. He says the wrong cue there. In 300 hours of gameplay, I had no idea if they braced or not. I thought they just had stat bonuses against charge and cavalry units. And then he says there is an animation, it's just not as noticeable. You can tell that they're braced when they lower their halberds. They're just much shorter, so they don't use them like pikes. Units need to be braced to receive their charge defense bonus. And charge defense bonus, as we saw, seems to be quite insignificant, because a unit of cavalry can charge into a unit of halberds or pikes and none of them will die. It's not enough to overcome the hit point system. They brace automatically when they're standing still. Look at the first Warhammer 2 clip where they're standing more idle, yelling and waving their halberds around, versus the second clip where they all lower their halberds and lean forward a little, except that one madman who tries to do an underhand swing. Yeah, exactly, so that's extremely deceptive. How can they be braced when it's possible for men to just break rank? I saw men breaking rank all across the line. How are they braced? It's a strange bracing, it's an unsatisfying bracing, and it's an ineffective bracing. It's no good. It's bad in terms of the visuals, it's bad in terms of the player feedback from the visuals, and it's also bad in terms of the actual gameplay of it. And I fucking hated how bracing worked in Three Kingdoms, as I've already said. I fucking hated it. You can disagree, but you're disagreeing with things fall when they're dropped. Here, It's an animation, it happens automatically without the user's input. You do not manage it, it is not something you tell your units to do. The formation is something entirely different, and I can already see you're trying to squeeze them together as if they're the same thing. Yes, the spear wall toggle is technically something you micromanage, except the files show that all it actually does is reduce the unit's movement speed, increase their bonus V cavalry, and decrease their attack against infantry. That is basically no different than what happens in any other Total War game, including Warhammer. It's a spreadsheeted ability, as certain people would like to say. It just comes with some fancy graphics to distract you from the fact. The animation itself has absolutely nothing to do with gameplay, so don't try and use that argument on me because it's incorrect. It's funny how they go from the whole point of the game is animations and aesthetics and superficial spectacle, and then they can just do a complete 180 whenever it's convenient and start saying animations are not important. I don't even look at the animations, I just stay zoomed out. They are so full of shit. They squirm so fucking hard on here. They are so fucking dishonest. It's fucking disgusting. They contradict themselves all the fucking time, and it's so fucking obvious that they do. They are utterly and completely full of shit. Why are they so willing to debase themselves and display such unvirtuous conduct in full view when they're not even getting paid to do it? That's the worst fucking thing. They're doing this in their spare time. They are being unvirtuous and dishonest and contemptible entirely for its own fucking sake. It's pathetic. And sure, people can have different criteria for fun. The thing is though, trying to prove to everyone that your criteria for fun is better than anyone else's, which yes, I've seen your post involving subreddit, this is absolutely what you do, is incredibly sad. Just think, if people said this kind of thing about people criticising gacha games or loot boxes or demonstrably crap game design that people get taught to avoid when they're in university getting educated on how to design games, this is what you have to believe to be a bootlicker for bad game design. You have to believe that there's no such thing as engaging gameplay or gameplay that respects the player or games that are well designed according to sound game design principle that gets taught in university courses about game design. That there's no such thing as actual virtue or unvirtue, that there's no way that you can conduct yourself in games that lends itself to good character and growth and learning. All of that is nonsense because we are just here to consume, and it's a completely grey area. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. This is what they have to hide behind. How pathetic is this? And then he caps off by saying, this post is just another example of my fun is better than your fun. Well, if you admit that you don't care about things that you should obviously care about, and you're having fun in your own twisted, strange way, then yeah, damn right, our fun is better than your fun. And what makes this even better is that he is probably not even good at the games. He said he's played them for thousands of hours, and he said he's played the worst games for thousands of hours. So if he was to upload the most virtuous, satisfying gameplay he could produce, it would be worthless, vapid dog shit. I have actually been contracted by AAA game companies to produce gameplay for them that they can use to market their games. Gameplay that is appealing on the marketplace of competing with all of these other games. I've been paid money, I've been flown out to do that. This guy hasn't. Oh, that's the funniest thing. If he was to actually produce gameplay, I don't even think, this is the thing, I don't think he even believes what he's saying. See if he was to do his best to produce gameplay that he thinks is fun, and that is better fun, I bet you it would be vapid. I bet you it doesn't exist and he's talking out his ass. And then the guy comes back with, I have never been involved in subreddit. He has a subreddit. You can check my profile before grouping with a group of people you clearly have resentments to. You seem quite upset. I have never told you that your fun is inferior to mine. See, he's getting completely paranoid and schizoed. He's schizoing out. Also, what argument? I'm sorry if I'm not as knowledgeable on Total War mechanics as you are, but I wasn't trying to squeeze anything together. Thank you for letting me know that just plain animation is different from enter formation, but did you really have to do so in a way like I'm your arch nemesis to be slain? Maybe, just maybe, there are different kinds of people in this subreddit with different levels of understanding on the game, and just maybe not everyone is part of what you view as the big bad. If you don't find what I find fun, then you're a bad person group. And then he says, sorry about the volume thing, it's late at night and thought you were the op still, who I have frequently seen there. See how paranoid he is? Holy shit, everything is a threat, everyone's his enemy. Also, yes, I have resentments to everyone who visits that subreddit, as they're some of the most toxic people in the community. The community. Who the fuck would want to be a part of this absolutely disgusting consumer base on this shithole subreddit? The people on my subreddit are superior to the people here. That's another thing that I'm happy to declare superiority with regards to. The caliber of person on this subreddit compared to mine. And it's obvious if you just look at the way we conduct ourselves and the way we write. No one in my subreddit fucking lies about people. No one in my subreddit spams out paragraphs of paranoid nonsense. But anyway, yes, what you're seeing in that video is an animation of a formation, a toggleable ability, like Bretonnian Knight's Wedge formation. The animation itself doesn't really have to do with gameplay. Alright, so we just saw this guy embarrass himself and go off on some random person over nothing. But look at this. It didn't end there, because while this guy was spazzing out, he started going off on someone else about my subreddit, and then some random person responded to him. Some guy that has 65,000 karma, and just a regular person, an actual real person, not a sock account, and he says, "That poster does seem to make posts in that other sub, but since you talked about post history, I checked yours too, and it's disturbing. I doubt even a CA employee is that much out there crusading, making posts about how people dare criticise CA and Warhammer, and commenting on every post that does criticise CA. You also seem to police members and their histories. Creepy." And he has nothing to say in response to that. So this is one of the worst bootlickers on this shithole subreddit. There's a few of them, and I can recognise them by name a lot of the time. And this guy has been outed as just being a creepy fucking schizo. So I'm happy about this. He has just been losing his fucking mind about these comparison posts recently, and now other people on the subreddit have started to pick up on his extremely creepy schizo behaviour and are calling him out for it, and he has nothing to say. So he has been fucking clamped, and it's nice to see that. Alright, next up. Alright, so this is another response to the discussion about width and depth, how wide and deep these games are. And he says, "Don't know what you're talking about, mate. Your comparison showed nothing more than how poorly Medieval 2 aged. And it used to be my favourite game ever back in the day. I actually laughed when I saw that charge. Formations would be cool though. Honestly, if they added some of these things you're describing at the expense of a DLC pack, I wouldn't mind." He doesn't realise this, but he just professed that he would be willing to pay for work already done and which has simply been removed to streamline a game. See how insidious this is? It's clearly obviously doable, yeah, exactly. But to me, they have the same unimportant value, and you seem to brandish these things like it's the seasoning that food desperately needs. Even more, the only reason I would support this is if it became a gameplay option in the settings, because I sure as hell wouldn't enable manual bracing, especially in a fast-paced game like Total War Warhammer. That's a really strange comment. It seems to ignore that the game should be balanced to make bracing a part of the game, because right now it isn't really. But games from 2017 to 2020 feel emptier, but more flash. So he said that, right? That's another thing he said. And then the guy responds with, "You're literally trying to display flash with this post because the halberdiers are taking a knee. That seems like a bit of a reach. There are bracing animations in Total War Warhammer 2, because the bracing is automatic, although they are milder. It's not removed, it's still there mechanically. Yeah, but it's weak, it doesn't participate in the gameplay. You saw it, the cavalry just ploughed straight through, and none of them died. I don't know why the halberdiers in your video did not brace. I guess they didn't sit still for enough seconds, or they bugged out. It's hard to realise why that's the case, because you show the charge footage a bit too quickly. Other than, well, these games have problems with bracing. Systemically, they're really weird. You saw it in my Three Kingdoms footage. I had all of these lines formed up, and the unit didn't brace because not enough men were in position. It's just like how units don't work properly when they're in column and they're firing. In order for a unit of archers to fire at a target, the whole column has to adjust to be facing the target head on a lot of the time. It's really fucked up and really strange. You can actually see entire columns of guns rotating around on an axis before they're willing to shoot at enemy units. It looks and feels really horrible. Maybe infantry are similarly inflexible, which is ironic given what these games are going for, being really accessible and easy to use. And then he says, other than the animations themselves, you won't convince anyone with half a brain that micro units to brace is tactical depth. Well, it is. No one that's ever played any amount of real-time tactics games would ever be capable of saying something as stupid as this. In a game like Men of War 2, on Robs, which is one of the most punishing real-time tactics experiences I've ever had, controlling whether your guys are standing up fully or crouched makes all the difference in terms of whether they're using cover effectively, and it's really satisfying when you see that difference affect how they perform. This is just a pathetic thing to say, it's just pathetic and embarrassing. How can you think this if you've played games like Shogun 2, or Medieval 2, or Rome 1? Even Rome 2. I remember when Rome 2 first came out, a lot of tournament players were talking about how important it was to brace, to take the charge, and that wasn't even a game that rewarded bracing. And then of course you've got Yarrow walls moving in formation, and you want to be facing any oncoming threat, you want to be prepared. There's preparedness. And then in Three Kingdoms, when you're usually the attacker, if you were to allow a charge reflect to happen, it would be the end of your cavalry unit. But if you can get the enemy infantry moving and preclude their bracing status, then you can just ride over them, so you see it from the other side. So this is a really strange comment, it doesn't seem sincere. And then he says, apparently some people around here unironically believe this. So this guy is dismissing the states of infantry, the combat readiness states, the combat preparedness of infantry. So you're just turning infantry units into blocks of hit point pools if they don't have this. So that's a really depressing comment to see that get 20 upvotes. It's just dismissing all of infantry tactics pretty much. Brain dead. And then another comment where people are talking about it taking work, which we already know it doesn't. The work's already been done. It's not substantial. And then he says, there's another argument to be made that CA should hire more people so that they can have both, but I think it's disingenuous to compare aspects of two games with different focuses. How is it disingenuous? That's a serious accusation for what is ultimately just a side-by-side comparison. How do you even know the implication? See, if he was to elaborate on the disingenuity, he would have nothing to say. It's disingenuous to accuse people of being disingenuous when you can't demonstrate any disingenuity whatsoever. I could make posts called Unit Variety 2017 v 2004 showing different human spearmen from Medieval 2 contrasted with human spearmen, dinosaurs and rattling guns from Warhammer 2. It wouldn't be fair to Medieval 2 because having dinosaurs wasn't where the focus of the game was. Ironically, these modern Total War games fare very poorly when you score them according to principles of unit differentiation, paying special attention to orthogonal unit differentiation. There's lots of ways to use lots of different units in Medieval 2, but there aren't very many ways to use many units in modern Total War games because the systems are not very good in them. Let's be serious, the way that the units in these games are designed is that they're in tiers. The first time I heard tier 4 infantry, I cringed. Stamina doesn't matter, height doesn't really matter, climate doesn't really matter, there's no weather. These games are streamlined, dumbed down and flattened. So this is a comment that on the surface seems sensible, but when you actually scrutinise it and examine it at all, it completely falls apart. Just watch my video, The Fallacy of Total War's Unit Diversity, and you can see this getting debunked. If your game is full of reskins and is just a spreadsheet simulator, and where there's not really any possibility space that the player can engage, there isn't actually any unit differentiation. At least he says variety here instead of diversity, because diversity is usually the bullshit buzzword that people on here like to use. My ideal would be more units with high quality animations, but frankly that probably isn't on the table. For Warhammer, when the choice comes down to more units or better animations, I prefer more units. So more excuse making with fallacious premises. Very, very sad to see this. Someone agrees, wide but shallow. And then more excuse making about zero sum, the zero sum fallacy. This is really prevalent on here, the zero sum fallacy. Once again, it doesn't take any real work. In fact, they enacted work to remove it, if anything. it's conceivable that they did more work than they needed to just to have it not be present. If there are any modders out there that have seen stuff disabled along these lines, leave a comment. And then someone says, consumer demand, if you tried to release a game with the graphics of Medieval 2 today, nobody would notice your cool detailed unit animations, they'd just whine about how it looks like a 20-year-old game. Yeah, you kind of saw that with Rome Reheated. And then someone says the horses are big and it should have pushed the formation more. Maybe. And then someone says it takes a lot of effort to do animation, but at the same time, people were saying this about reloading animations for guns, and modders have managed to put it in the game for free in their spare time. One guy in his fucking bedroom managed to do something that Creative Assembly couldn't do for whatever fucking reason. And at the same time, people are talking about how Creative Assembly's animators are doing things in their spare time that are making it into the game. So it seems like this game is benefiting a lot from charity of time in terms of animators doing animation work and putting animations in the game. So the proposition that CA can't do it is absurd. And then someone responds to when the guy said, it feels reasonable to expect that human soldiers will be far more basic in a game where most units are not human at all. He says, another day, the bar is lowered. Oh my god. You could just as easily make a video comparing unit variety from Medieval 2 and Warhammer 2 to show how much the bar has been raised. Oh my god. And then he says, could you though? So it's the same guy and he says, could you though? I mean, apart from graphics. And this is it. The gameplay itself has not been assisted by this variety that he's talking about, because the monsters are all fundamentally the same. They're just big things with higher mass that have bigger health bars, and they charge into the melee and lose their health while taking down health. There's not really much differentiation of action. I don't understand really how people can say this stuff when I've got videos of Men of War 2 Robs. That's a game where every single unit serves a different purpose, and all you have to do to see that in action is click on my Men of War 2 Robs playlist. Look at the video I put up called Piets in Every Bush and Crater, and you can see just how much I'm using all the units differently. There's nothing remotely like that in any modern Total War game. There absolutely is not anything like that. This is all just fictional. See, all of this stuff about unit variety is completely made up. It's just LARPing. If you were to ask them to explain how they use these units differently, they would absolutely stumble and they would not be able to give you any good explanations. Ask them how you use Monster X differently from Monster Y in a battle, and they would not have answers a lot of the time. Just name two random monsters and say, what can this one do that that one can't do? They're not going to have answers because it's all just bullshit. It's a LARP. It's just LARPing. Alright, so this guy says, and to the point that you would be arguing against a game from 2006, lol. Yeah, it's funny how we're arguing. We're actually having this argument. It's sensible. This is a hill that people are willing to die on. A modern game against a game from fucking 15 years ago. The truth is clear really, from starters, even the very core of it. For example, the hit points damage mechanic has been reduced and simplified because of the shittiness of the Total War 3 engine. It's just the way things are for newer titles by default. No amount of work and effort by the devs will fix that. He's right. He's right. The way the combat is simulated means that the interactions between the units are always going to be really simple. And then he does give an effort post. He actually gives one. Yes, I could. Are you insane? I don't even know how you could be arguing this unless you're completely blinded by nostalgia. Even compared to Rome 1, Medieval 2 has pretty poor unit variety. Probably only better than Shogun 2 and maybe 3K. Shogun 2 has the best unit variety out of all of the older Total War games. Just watch my Shogun 2 tournaments and you'll see that the way the units and the matchups work and the tactics that are produced by them, that folds out from the units, makes everything in modern Total War games just look brain dead. If I was to submit my best multiplayer battle of Shogun 2 and have you submit your best multiplayer battle of Warhammer, it would just be embarrassing. It would be absolutely embarrassing. The kind of action and forethought and planning that happens in Shogun 2 compared to a modern Total War game is just, it's night and day difference. The majority of every other faction's roster is shared with more than one other faction. Literally 10 out of the 17 factions have feudal knights and dismounted feudal knights, which will probably compose the majority of your army for most of the game. These are just unit archetypes. The only difference is that in something like Warhammer, it gets reskinned and given different names. Armoured Sergeants are literally just Sergeant Spearmen with 5 extra armour. Other than that, their stats are identical. Yeah, of course, because that's something that Medieval 2 does as well. It just has unit archetypes with slight tweaking. differentiation that isn't orthogonal, that doesn't really affect decision making, and half the factions get them too. If you're playing a Western faction, the main difference will be whether you use archers or crossbowmen, and if you get chivalric knights, which are just slightly buff hero knights. The only faction in the game with unique artillery is the Mongols, and you can't even play them without changing the files. Compare that to today, where the community is in uproar because Siege might get blue Chaos Warriors. So it's an uproar because they're gonna just reskin, which is all they do anyway. It's just reskins. Find me a unit from Medieval 2 that fills the same role as Jezzails, Iron Drakes, Dragons, Waywatchers, Chameleon Skanks, Necrophects, Colossi, Mortis Engines, and that's not touching on the variation that heroes and magic add to the game. Alright, well, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to download the Warhammer mod for Medieval 2 and show you how the systems in Medieval 2 simulate the variety way better than in this modern Warhammer 2 or Warhammer 3. I bet you that the way the factions play is actually going to be more different than what you're describing here in Warhammer, because in Warhammer all you have are these weird systems of stats that get tweaked. And this is how you would actually argue this point. If you wanted to effectively argue this, you would compare an attempted depiction of Warhammer in Medieval 2 to an attempted depiction of Warhammer on this modern Total War, and I bet you the team of modders would win over this AAA effort from 2021 or 2022 when Warhammer 3 comes out. The way you play Ikit Claw versus the way you can play Deathmaster Snitch versus the way you play Throt the Unclean is ironically more different than most factions in Medieval 2. With Clan Scryer, well, it would be because in Medieval 2 the Christian factions are all fundamentally the same and the Muslim factions are all fundamentally the same. It's just like in Shogun 2. All of the Buddhist factions have the same roster, and then you have the Ikuike. And guess what? Medieval 2 and Shogun 2 are well-designed games with good systems. It's fun to play as Christians in Medieval 2, it's fun to play as Buddhists in Shogun 2. With Clan Scry, you'd have a shitload of weapon teams and artillery with Plague Priests to drop summons and Doom Wheels to run interference. With Clan Eshin, you can bring a stack of 19 gutter runners and skirmish the enemy to death with your sneaky ninja rats. 19 of the same thing. With Throt, you can bring an army full of Molder monsters that all have different stats and abilities, or kamikaze Skaven slaves that you can detonate at will. Compare that to Medieval 2, where in most armies you're pretty much always going to bring a front line of shielded knights, spears on the flanks, archers or crossbowmen, and knights. I only listed one race out of 15, a good deal of them play in a completely unique way. Well, you definitely have all the factions playing in unique ways in the mod, the Call of Warhammer mod. The thing that we're actually looking at here, that's what this post is about. We're talking about Warhammer 2 against Medieval 2. In this Call of Warhammer mod, the factions all do play completely differently. It's just like how the Third Age mod for Medieval 2, which simulates Lord of the Rings, has way more differentiation in playstyles than any Total War game that came before it, because that's what the people that made the mod are actually going for. And of course, that's the mod that inspired Warhammer to eventually be depicted with the AAA effort. So it's not a surprise that people would be convinced that they're playing different playstyles in a modern Total War game that's going for exactly that, even if when you examine the gameplay, it all fundamentally comes down to the same thing. Ignoring cavalry, largely ignoring infantry, spamming ranged and having big monsters pinned so that the archers can just shoot into it. I bet you with half of these factions, you're basically just pinning with monsters, big monsters with big hit point bars, so that you can fire into it with archers, which is fundamentally the same thing as what you do in Troy, and in a way that's what you do in Three Kingdoms as well, because only artillery, archers and cavalry are viable in Three Kingdoms, so it always devolves to pin the enemy with cavalry, keep them away from the archers with cavalry, and then shoot them to death. And I guarantee you that that's what you're going to be doing with almost all of these factions and Warhammer. That's the most effective way to play, and that's because that is the way the game is designed. It's not a problem with Warhammer as a setting, it's a problem with modern Total War games and the laziness of them. This is what they're designed to be like. Stamina doesn't matter, terrain doesn't matter, weather doesn't matter, differentiated units don't matter. I actually like Medieval 2 a lot. I think it's a pretty great game. I have 500 hours in it and finished a campaign in it a few months ago, but there's zero way to argue that it's anywhere close to the scope of the Warhammer games. And then this guy folds, but I suspect it might just be because he's got all these paragraphs to debunk and that would take fucking ages. So he just gave up. I would push back against this as someone that doesn't even fucking play Warhammer, because I've played Three Kingdoms, I've played Troy, and I've talked to endless Warhammer fans that have played these Warhammer Total War games, and they would dispute this, definitely. Especially when you're talking about playing on higher difficulty settings, holy shit, because that just exacerbates the problems with the game's balancing and design. In the Warhammer 2 intro, we see elves going into formation to protect their archers. Why can't we have that in the game? Formations are present in every historical game, including 3K Attila and Rome 2. That came right before and after Warhammer. The problem is not CA forgetting how to implement these things or making less of an effort. In the end, all comes down to micromanagement. Alright, so this guy might be onto something. How much micro can a player cope with before ditching the game due to frustration? Warhammer brings spellcasting and a myriad of lore and item abilities. Some units do have abilities too. The rest of the micro goes into positioning. Now imagine you also had to micro formations for many units. At what point does it stop being enjoyable? So this is probably getting close to it. They've decided against it, of course, and this might be a part of it. They don't think very much of their players because they shouldn't, because they're just Warhammer fanboys that are really casual. So this is it. This is definitely a part of the equation. Yep. Yeah, I have literally never seen lance formation on the top tournament level of Warhammer 2. Even the best players are stretched thin already. Activating each character's abilities basically all at once so they can move on and micro something else, effectiveness be damned. And it doesn't help that the game is not even allowing hotkeys. You can't even activate things with hotkeys in that game because the game is just such a fucking lazy mess. And this is another thing. Not only do they expect their players to be bad, but they don't care about helping them get better because they don't even allow basic key binding. There's not a single key on your keyboard that you can press that will get your cavalry into lance formation, whatever that means. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, but you can't even do keybinds. You have to sit clicking on your screen all over the place. It's RTT for babies. For fucking babies. Even if CA added something like a formation that gave charge defense against all instead of large in exchange for slower animation, it would never get used because bracing is something you have seconds to do, so anything that slows that down makes the unit worse. You should be able to just tap a key. You click on the unit that you see that needs to brace, and as soon as it enters your mind that it needs to brace, you tap the key and then it's braced. But nah, they're not interested in that. You could do it in Shogun 2. You could easily Yari wall up an entire line before the melee starts by just dragging a box and tapping a key. Can't do that anymore. Absolutely not. The reason we don't see lance formation is it's... The reason hence why is because we don't see lance formation is it's terrible. It makes your unit engage with less models per charge. It's way better to just charge in a thin line. So that seems to undermine any notion of using mass and depth to break formations. Am I wrong there? If you have to stretch out the unit into a big line, then you're obviously not trying to break formations, you're just trying to get as much damage as possible, you're trying to just get kills. There's also the element of integrity to the source material. Tabletop Warhammer doesn't have formations other than a lance, and this was probably a deliberate decision to focus more on magic and monsters and fantasy elements in contrast to the historical tabletop systems that existed at the time. These sentences. Formations would make the game more enjoyable. Yeah. Who the hell has trouble microing formations on top of magic? The casuals. You just click and name a magic skill, click a button and make troops fall into formation. Yep, abilities and spells could have hotkeys if CA cared to implement them. Modders have done so already. Hotkeys are still micro though. While I would love hotkeys, they wouldn't fix this problem. The main issue isn't the UI, but the amount of factors the player and the AI will have to juggle at once. Warhammer is a very fast-paced game, and having more models to switch out for most basic units is going to drag the micro even further down. It's pretty difficult to keep up with all the things you have to do when the lines are about to clash already. Particularly multiplayer where you can't pause. There's spells. Oh man, pausing. Holy shit. I've never paused in a Total War game, even when I was a kid. I think I just avoided it altogether. Play properly. On the hardest difficulty. There's spells, buffs, countercharging, the occasional feint or redirect, and shifting your support units around to compensate. Spell hotkeys are all 1 to 6. So that's it, that's the only hotkeys. My god, fucking magic spells. And yeah, they're acknowledging now that abilities don't even have hotkeys. Fucking hell. Spells have hotkeys. You hold Alt and press a number, abilities do not, and that really bugs me. Yeah, it's inexcusable. It defies all RTT game design over the past 25 years. You could hotkey in really early games. It's just ridiculous that you can't hotkey basic functions in 2021. See if Warhammer 3 doesn't have hotkeys, that just confirms that They don't give a fuck. It's just inexcusable. Troy had fucked hotkeys as well. I was complaining about broken hotkeys and rebinding. And of course, Rome Reheated had locked keybinds. So they don't give a shit. They don't know how to design games. They don't care at all about catering to basic needs of decent players. They're going totally down the road of having casual crap games. And it's obvious, every observation you can make confirms it. Adding more options will probably do the opposite for the AI, as it now has more things to juggle and more things to try and plan around on top of the things that it's already struggling with. Yeah, that's a part of it as well. The more depth they put into their games, the more the shortcomings and failures of the shit AI become obvious. So every time they make the game better, they're making the AI worse, and they have to put resources into making the AI better as well. So they can just make the game really simple, dumbed down, streamlined, and they don't have to worry about the AI being unable to handle it, so they just don't. They give themselves less work by giving themselves less work, and it's a vicious cycle, at least when you start thinking about the AI problem. Because of course, 95% of players of Total War are just casuals that want to comp stomp the AI on a Saturday or Sunday night. They don't give a shit about actual competitive play against other players. So all they're going to be doing really most of the time is playing against an AI on normal or hard and crushing it and hoping it just puts up a feeble opposition. A basic challenge, essentially. So that's all that CE are incentivized to have. Just maintain that basic challenge and not fuck it up. Just popping over to the historical side. It's funny how people have to contextualize whenever they're about to comment on anything that isn't Warhammer. Even without all the bells and whistles of Warhammer, the 3K AI really suffers in its ability. The 3K AI really suffers in its inability to use formations to even close to the extent that the player can. It's most proficient with loose, as it will remember to turn it on when taking arrow fire, but it usually can't decide to turn it off before it gets charged if it's still getting shot. And that's still the best formation AI we've probably ever had. Imagine the AI trying to juggle static formations in a game where wind spells exist. The result isn't going to be pretty. Even just implement loose formation when under missile fire would be a huge advantage towards the AI when most player cheese with ranged and artillery. Yeah, that's another part of it. Everyone is just exploiting spamming range units into blobs, so if the AI can use loose formation, then one of the most important tools that a lot of players use is nerfed hard, so they're incentivized to never do it. And someone responds with, if you think Warhammer games are micro-intensive, you're lying to yourself. You can use abilities whenever you want to. You're not forced to stack 5 wizards into your army. Position an army, it's always the same. Hammer and anvil, whether it's cavalry or single entity shit. And then someone responds with, you've never seen multiplayer gameplay, have you? At least not on a tournament level. In a game where you control a flying monster, issue a charge order into a ground unit just to cancel it halfway and keep moving the unit in an S pattern while readying yourself to do it all over again just to dodge a magic missile spell, while still trying to micro the rest of your army and making sure your cavalry don't fall into bait and switch set up by your opponent, so you don't really have the time for toggling unit formations. Oh man, alright, so in a competitive environment, micro is always going to be a factor. There's always going to be a micro arms race, and the best players are always going to be finding ways to use their micro to get little advantages. So what it comes down to is whether the micro that they find and discover is meaningful, and this does not sound impressive. This really doesn't sound impressive, and when you click on this, it's not impressive at all. It's just, I'm going to watch it actually because it's only a minute long, so it's fine.
60-second strategies. Bait your opponent. This can be used to punish your bait before pulling it out last second to punish your opponent. So
this is a case of he's impressed by charging a cavalry unit in, pulling it out, and then casting a spell on the blob that's formed by the charge. So it's really simple stuff. It's not impressive, and it's not micro-intensive either. This is really simple stuff. This is Babby's first real-time strategy game. And Total Warhammer combat has evolved well beyond Hammer and Anvil. There are players who send bats into a missile unit to lure enemies into sending in units to pile on top of them and create a giant blob for bombardment. Babby's first real-time strategy. And then there are players who activate multiple buffs on multiple characters with precise timing to turn a losing fight around. And of course, there are flyers who will be swooping in and out of combat to pick off the fragile parts of your enemy. Okay, well that could be interesting. If you have good vision and you can spot weakened units and time it perfectly and break them, that's always interesting to see that happen if it's done masterfully. Hammer and Anvil is still a powerful tactic, but it's only one amongst many, and with such a diverse toolkit available to every player, there simply is no time to consider toggling formation of every single unit. This is such a silly thing to say. If it's worth doing, people will find the time to do it and will prioritise doing it. You can use this to excuse not having absolutely anything being added to the game. There's nothing that you can't dismiss by just saying, the game is already too full of stuff to do, we're not going to put in any more. It's just nonsense. It's a nonsense objection. 99% of the player base doesn't give a flying fuck about multiplayer. Yep, this is true. They don't play it. They never even click it. 95% never even click it. In single player, you can breeze through the very hard campaigns with next to zero micro. True, absolutely true. Just look at the people on YouTube that do it. They don't have good micro. They don't even use keybinds. They don't even use proper controls. They just click their way to winning. Total War battles have been the same since Rome 1, whether you cry about it or not. MP is dead. Yep, the one time they actually tried was Shogun 2. Just watch my video, the gutting of Total War's multiplayer. They've given up on it. Appealing to something that they've just given up on and assigned a budget of 0 to only gets you so far. It can only be used to establish a few things about the gameplay, but it's ultimately inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. You have to be able to show how it's relevant to say this kind of stuff. Another comment saying it's done to cut back. Nope. More talking about how horses against spears would go. Who cares? And this is a really silly comment here. This place is just bitch about Warhammer Central now. Never mind that CA already has to balance 15 plus factions on 5 difficulties plus multiplayer. Okay, well, they do a bad job of all of that. The multiplayer is a zero budget bare bones that's dead. The factions are not balanced on any difficulty. Infantry are fucking worthless on every difficulty, and on the higher difficulties, the situation is beyond pathetic. This is such a bad comment, and I've not even read past the second line. They should totally also balance multiple formations for every single unit, and add distinct officers for every unit, and musicians, and standard bearers, and combat, and better combat animations, and better models, and better battles, and better maps, and an army painter. Well, see all of this? Shogun 2 had it all a decade ago. So this is just coming out as a really pathetic comment. More units, more races. Now we have enough units, we have enough races. Fuck this. Make the units that we have worth anything. Sick of seeing people ask for more of what we already have. See, if you ask for more of this, you'll just get more of what you already have and it'll be fucking meaningless. Make one good game. Don't give us more undifferentiated units that are just reskins with stat tweaks. Stop asking for this. Bigger map. Yep, definitely can ask for that. That's good. If they had that, that would be good. The gameplay would be improved, I think, because the maps in these modern Total War games are really small. It's a really closed, small arena, and have better graphics. Well, yeah, when Shogun 2 from 10 years ago looks better than Warhammer 2 in 2021. Actually, when Shogun 2 in 2011 looks better than Warhammer 3 in 2022, then yeah, you have a problem there. You really want to be improving. So this is a vapid comment that got 14 upvotes. And yeah, some guy brings this guy down to earth. So he said this place is just bitch about Warhammer Central now. And then he comes back with, talk about selective memory. Buddy, this sub is the dictionary definition of fanboys. People have to change trousers at every bit of news, froth at the mouth at the very notion that CA isn't perfect, and trip over themselves to ride valiantly to the defence of CA at even the slightest criticism. And we've already saw that on here. You have actual schizos that are full-time apologists for free in this fucking place. And there's not just one of them, there's several. It's only been like a couple of weeks, and this was a week ago. We've just had the Siege rework, which is extremely disappointing. Since this, we've had the Siege rework, and there are fanboys out in droves making excuses for garbage. It's only been a couple of weeks. Surely you haven't forgotten how many people were jumping to make excuses for CA using the chosen models we've had since Game 1, but blue for the Warriors of Siege, have you? Also, canning 3k so we could have this Chinese bullshit. Hell, even this thread is the mildest critique of the loss of proper bracing in unit formations and unit upgrade visuals, yet people like you are here with a persecution complex, so eager to be a victim along with the poor defenceless triple A multi-million pound company. Yeah, exactly. And then it's just bitchy snapping back. Fuck this. Wait a minute, where did he say this? Saying that negativity and dishonest framing is ruining the sub is literally the same as sucking corporate dick. As opposed to you, so immune to the persecution complex that your immediate response to my comments is to simply say, oh, actually, the sub is too fanboy and honest critics are being attacked by people like you projecting. So it's just a no you. He's saying no you, but he's obviously the fucking fanboy that's turned up to bootlick. I can't believe people are willing to push back against the notion that this sub is full of fucking bootlicking fanboy losers. It's so obvious. I can prove that I've been lied about on here by people butthurt that I was saying Total War is doing badly. I had 1,000 upvotes on a comment lying about me and I can prove that it was lying. This is the worst fucking place on the whole of the Total War scene. Absolutely. This subreddit has become a Warhammer subreddit with garbage memes being upvoted into space. I despise it. Exactly. And then someone says, it's because historical fans are huffing that copium bag, crying about Warhammer relentlessly and making up QAnon tier conspiracy theories on why the next historical title is being sabotaged by Warhammer 3, to the point they make literal YouTube videos on that matter. Damn right. More of them, please. More people talk about this situation that we're obviously dealing with, that's being confirmed day by day. What more do they need to do? Rome Reheated was a cash grab. They canned 3K mid-development. The sieges in Warhammer 3, as of a couple of days ago, because this is a week old now, as of a couple of days ago, Warhammer 3 sieges are the laziest shit imaginable. Like, what more do they need to do? When are you going to fucking admit that we're right? And then the poster of the thread has something else that he said. So this one is a bit funky. You see in Vanilla Medieval 2, the spear wall formation does not work, because when a unit in melee approaches close enough to a pikeman, halberdier, they will switch to the secondary weapon. While that is amazing for cavalry, it is an atrocious oversight of spear wall infantry. Modders got around this by removing the secondary weapon and thus forcing the polearm units to use their damn polearm. Yep, because pikes in Medieval 2 are completely broken. The only way to get them to work properly is to remove the secondary weapon so they don't take it out. It completely fucks them up in fights. So this is a way that Warhammer 2 Vanilla versus Call of Warhammer, or rather Total War mods in general, So this is, in a way, a Warhammer 2 Vanilla versus Call of Warhammer, or rather Total War mods in general. I think Stainless Steel fixed it first, but modders shouldn't have done that. It is CA that should have done that. They released Kingdoms expansion, but never addressed that. It boggles the mind. Stuff like that makes me wonder, do developers like CA actually play their games for a significant amount of time? They had to have been aware of it, and the damn fix was easy. And it's a sign of things to come in the Total War franchise. 25 upvotes. And someone grabbed onto his last sentence and said, except Medieval 2 was over a decade ago in a different year with a different tech, with different devs, and totally different franchise. So he's trying to break up the connection that he made, Jesus, for whatever reason. What's the motivation to try to break this point? What's the incentive to take the impact out of this connection that's being drawn? I wonder. Yes, if only we could find the technology that allowed us to have our polearms braced in video games again. The lost secrets of a decade ago. Ancient forgotten Atlantean tech. The tech priests of 40k would kill for it. So you're trying to justify the lack of depth of combat in your games because we have more tech and more experienced devs? Oh my god. And then someone responds saying guard mode helps a lot, which it does, but it's still broken. Even if you can finick it to work a bit better, it's still fucked. Nothing new here. Warhammer traded depth and battle and systems in favour to a more flashy, show-off style of gameplay. That's a part of it as well, of course. All flash, no substance. Everything that Warhammer does better than this mod is purely in visual aspects. People around here are crazy about the game itself, myself included. I spent way too much time in Warhammer 1 and 2, but let's be honest here, if not for the setting, Warhammer would be considered a really shit Total War game. Of course. I think unit formations got dropped due to magic basically making them pointless. A defensive shield/pike wall would get decimated by a single AoE spell. No. That's a really weird suggestion. Really weird. And that would be damning for the inclusion of AoE spells. It means that AoE spells destroy infantry tactics. So that's a strange implication. You have to be careful if you're going to say stuff like that. Now instead we don't have formations and get amorphous blobs of infantry that get decimated by a single AoE spell anyway. Just like the real tabletop game, now it all makes sense. You're complaining about there not being a better brace animation. That's literally the definition of something flashy that doesn't add any depth to combat. Also, there are a ton of things that Warhammer does better than this mod. You're just being disingenuous. Prove it. Prove it. How's it being disingenuous? This is an accusation that never gets backed up around here. It's not a substance, less animation. Braced polearms stop knights dead on their tracks in mid 2. If the halberdiers were not braced, half of them would die on the charge. That's still just an animation. If you strip every visual aspect, units in Total War are just numbers on a spreadsheet fighting each other. In both the video, the mod, and Warhammer 2, the units lost 5 to 10 men from the charge, while the way they crouched to lower their pegs looks super cool. I actually like the cav charge in Warhammer 2 better. The way that the knights in Medieval 2 just instantly lose all momentum looks janky and weightless. Getting charged by a 7-foot man wearing 100 pounds of armour, blah 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 blah. Been all over this already. It's just magic, man. Gameplay is very fast in Warhammer 2 and it's based almost entirely around heroes, magic, and 1 or 2 super elite units. It's almost became MOBA-esque. Yep. So it's no surprise that infantry combat has just been sabotaged. It's not important. Yep, when your lord can be made to solo several armies by himself, well, it kinda gets old after a bit. Yep, I feel like they could fix this by doing a system similar to 3K, where you could only have 3 heroes in your armies as generals, or just give us different slots for heroes and normal units. The moment the strongest armies were single unit spam, CA should do something to gut this, and don't come at me saying you only do this if you want, and how difficult you should either do OP shit or your game just becomes a grindfest. And then someone responds saying, what an idiotic take. The mod's only purpose was to fend off the hype until Total War Warhammer released. Other than that, it's just a crash fest with Dota 2 quotes. And that's not what I've heard. This is the first time I've heard about any of this. Be honest with yourself and give a straight answer. What do you play more, Total War Warhammer or the mod that does everything better other than graphics? How does it even handle magic these days? Is that better than Total War Warhammer as well? And then he responds with, and gets way more upvotes, I have at least 3 times the amount of playtime in Medieval 2 than in Warhammer. As you said, the mod crashes a lot, so I can't say for the mod itself. Being a more polished game is different from being a more in-depth game. And Medieval 2 or any other Total War, to be honest, just shits on Warhammer in terms of complexity and secondary systems. No doubt that Warhammer 1 and 2 runs better and has quality of life changes, but you can't say to me that battles in those games are complex. By the way, the mod is way older than the Total War Warhammer trilogy, way before we had any info if it would even exist in the first place. That's what I heard. I remember reading that this was made in like 2010, around the same time as Third Age, not long after. Oh, and I stand by what I said, Warhammer is a basic ass Total War game. A good game, sure, but a fucking basic ass Total War. And then he says, they're not complex in the historical titles either, my dude. So he's doing the whole historical fantasy thing. There's way more going on in a battle in Shogun 2, typically, than there is in fucking Warhammer, my god. There's way more things to keep track of and think about and consider, especially when you have a lot of different unit types and you're playing in a complex situation like a siege. Some multi-fort sieges in Shogun 2 with a lot of different kinds of units, a lot of different threats on a lot of different sides. So much going on and all these interactions between units are happening. And it's really rewarding to try and juggle it all and play it well and have it dynamically unfold and progress in unpredictable ways. And have situations emerge that are really tense. I don't know how you really get that in a game like Warhammer, or Three Kingdoms, or Troy. The latter 2 of which I played a lot of, and it was always crap. I played the game constantly when I was 13 or 14, having to press a button to manually brace your units in an extremely slow-paced game which gives even sloths enough time to think about their decision-making isn't really all that complex. The only harder thing about Medieval 2 and other historical games was general management on the battlefield and even on the campaign map. That's truly something I enjoyed more in the historical titles. Well, in Medieval 2, you're playing against a shit AI that is really passive. Once you get bogged down in a fight, and I recommend try the mod that we're actually talking about, against the AI in a field battle where there's 2 factions that have a lot of different units. See if you can keep up with that. I doubt you'll be able to if you're used to playing Warhammer and just spamming 19 in the same unit. Okay, I'll say it. IMO, the artistic direction for Call of Warhammer, is way better than Total War Warhammer's. Holy shit. 18 upvotes on that. Oh my god. Fucking hell. 15 years ago. Old Engine was way better at representing brutality of close combat and massive formation. Recently tried DLC mod after a long hiatus of not playing older Total Wars and was pleasantly surprised when saw how thinner formation slowly gets pushed back by sheer mass alone. Oh yeah, absolutely, I know exactly what he means. or how elite dwarf infantry stands their ground until the moment they break formation, and being isolated from each other, fall real quick. Even with worse graphics, it looked so much more real, exactly. Divide and Conquer mod. Amazing mod. I'm used to Third Age, but apparently that builds on Third Age and makes it even better. So, man, I'm on board with that. Officers, musicians, standard bearers, stances, formations, sorely missed. They're even a big thing in the tabletop game, actually, so it's a really huge disappointment we won't have them for the third game. Yep, you definitely won't. And then someone else comments on the Empire trailer for Warhammer 1. It's funny how people are talking about this mod now. It never used to get any exposure, but now people are really talking about it and comparing it. It's almost as if the minimum effort is what CA does best these days. Amazing the number of comment threads like this get, which amount to making excuses as to why an older game is more feature rich when it comes to pure combat and model or unit behaviour. Just stop already. It's the same guy who tries to spam his Medieval 2 autism here. I swear to God, Medieval 2 fans are the worst. It's not even the best historical game in the series. Oh, a lot of people think it is, and I like the arguments they use. They're compelling. Because it's modded. And we see the same comments for the base game for Rome Total War through Attila. Cavalry's not as impactful in Medieval. 2006 engine limitation. And then people say they're supposed to stop dead, which I agree with, of course. I like it when you put up a wall of pikes or halberds, polearms, and it stops charges in their tracks. Sadly, the technology just isn't there yet. Formations are pitiful in Warhammer. It seems like a lot of... Oh wait, I'm going to look at this one. Why are you asking so much from CA? They're just a small indie team of friends who make games over the weekend as a hobby. They don't have a budget of a AAA company. Oh my god. Crazy how different a game that's 11 years old is, different from another game. 11 years older than another game, it should say 11 years older, because the game is 15 or 16 years old now. Shouldn't the newer game be better then? The newer game is better in other ways. Oh man, the trivial ways. And worse and way more. Oh man, he's getting nailed on the points. Lost naval battles, visual unit progression, army traditions, fort battles, tons of 1v1 unit animations, crouching animation for hidden units, destructible city structures like barracks. Oh, this is another thing. I saw the zombies in Call of Warhammer go prone in long grass. They actually play dead. They go prone. Download Call of Warhammer, spawn in zombies in a custom battle. They go prone. That is how they go hidden. Holy shit. In Warhammer, they just stand there. You can't even see that they're hidden. You really notice this stuff. You really, really notice it. Destructible city structures like barracks, cultures, population, diplomacy, battle speeches, many more. Exactly, the game's been completely dumbed down and all you really get out of it is a more responsive mouse. But it's not even better in terms of interface because, as I've said, you can't even keybind, you can't even use hotkeys for essential functions. So I can arguably interface better with a game from 2006 than with these modern Total War games. Troy, Three Kingdoms and Warhammer all had fucked keybinds, so even though my mousing is really snappy and fast, and I can drag boxes quickly, there isn't fucking custom keybinds, there's locked keybinds, or there isn't keybinds, so it's just shit to play, it's fucking garbage to play. The wedge formation that is so important to Three Kingdoms, I can't access with the keyboard, the game is fucking miserable to play. Quality of life, my ass. He's right though, because that is all they go for really, quality of life. Superficial graphics, upgrade in the sense that it's easier on the eye in some ways, and a mouse that's smoother, but in every other way it's worse. Unit animations for monsters and lords, holy shit. Flying units, Call of Warhammer has flying units, holy shit, they're not even really flying. See how desperate they are for anything, they'll even cite things that are fucking vapid. Those units in Warhammer 2 and the upcoming Warhammer 3 are not actually flying. As someone else has said on my Discord, they have their Z-axis altered so they're 25 metres above the ground, and they just have this looping animation where their wings flap. They're not actually fucking flying. What the fuck? People are citing things that are just completely spurious. Oh man, this is terrible. I'm glad he's getting taken to task. And I presume there's going to be a lot of this. People taking to task the Warhammer fans on this thread, and I would be willing to go into it, but I've been going for too long already and I need to stop. This was a really gritty thread. Like, there was a lot of push and push back this time. There's definitely a lot of bootlickers on here. 309 comments, and it felt like a lot more. I'm only like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way down. But I've got to stop because it's just taken too long. And I think we've covered all the important points. To sum up, it seems like this was a bit more contentious. It wasn't a complete blowout like the reloading animations for guns on the other video, the other thread that we looked at, but on this one, it seems like they were willing to push back. But as usual, I think that their arguments are just terrible. When it comes to substance, they really struggle.